Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Peter Fenger. You might know me as the producer for the podcast, but for today, I have the privilege of stepping behind the mic for a very special episode. As for my guest, well, they hardly need an introduction. He's dedicated his career to supporting others, whether it's through his nonprofit organization, connecting people in need with pro bono therapy, his online testing program, helping thousands pass the EAP, or his work as a clinician in private practice in Honolulu, Hawaii. And of course, he's been the voice of this very podcast, hosting over 300 episodes and guiding countless meaningful conversations. Today, we turn the spotlight on our very own Dr. Graham Taylor. And this episode is a bittersweet one as we say goodbye to one of the most familiar and trusted voices of behavioral health today. While Graham will be pausing his regular engagement with the podcast, this won't be the last time we work together, and the door will always be open for his return. As the show's producer, I've had the privilege of working with Graham for 5 years, and I've learned so much from him and have enjoyed every moment behind the scenes. Today, I'd like to take a step back and reflect on the past 5 years, celebrating the impact of this podcast and giving Graham a chance to share his favorite moments, lessons learned, and parting thoughts for our listeners. Hi, Graham. Great to be with you today.
Peter, my friend, it's always great to be with you as well. Thanks so much for today's show.
Yeah, I'm really excited about our show and really be a nice reflection of all the work we've done together on the podcast.
Been a good time, hasn't it? It's been a significant period of time together. And
it has. Yeah. It has. And you know, I've really enjoyed working together. I mean, again, we'll get into it in the show, but just a really great experience.
I would agree. I would agree.
So let's start at the beginning. I want to ask you, what inspired you to take on this role of host for the podcast? And did you have any expectations when we first started?
Yeah, I've had a long involvement with mental health, 30 plus years now. I was involved with the test prep for almost 2 decades. Mm-hmm. And I was involved very intimately with Triad in terms of the test prep piece of it as well, Taylor study method as well. And then I was able to kind of move out of some of that management ownership role and move into with Brandon, our CEO, approaching me and very kindly offering me to do a podcast that Triad had never done before, and we didn't do, and we were running it, and we had a chance to talk about what that would look like. I was really interested in being able to, in Brandon's words, kind of evangelize a little bit, not just about Triad, but also about mental health and help people appreciate all the things that mental health has in terms of a really significant role in our lives. And so I was very interested. We did a couple of run-throughs with another guy and just to play around with some things that might look like. And so that was a wonderful opportunity to come into this. And then you and I had a chance to start working together, which I really loved. And I think we kind of took it from there.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've had a lot of fun in sort of crafting the show together, didn't we?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, but it's been fun too. I think what's been really a great part of it is to think about, well, who do we want to bring on? Right. But first of all, what do we think is important? What's going on in our world right now? What kind of mental health perspective can we bring to it? Mm-hmm. What can we really help people learn from the mental health field that can really accentuate and really benefit their lives in ways that maybe they hadn't thought of? And I think as you and I talked many, many, many times over the years about, well, what kind of topics do we want to have come in? What kind of guests would be the ones to best kind of represent that? I think we did a great job of being able to not just name those areas of interest, but also find some really great guests who were extremely knowledgeable and very compassionate in their approach to their work.
Yeah. I would say that compassion really ripples through a lot of the episodes. I mean, we found some pretty incredible guests that are doing some really innovative work. I want to sort of go back to the experience of being the host a little. And I want to ask you, was there anything surprising or unexpected about being the host?
I think how much fun I had, how enjoyable it really was to, I've got to practice and I do consultations, I do trainings, and I have a really wonderful life in the mental health field. But in my preparation each Monday, coming into the Thursday or Friday podcasts, I would see who's on our docket, look at the show doc you put together for us, do some research, get to read about them, watch their videos, and get really as acquainted as I could in that dimension of getting to know them. And I just so enjoyed having my view of mental health, which is pretty broad to start with, but even broadened even more to find out some of the unique things that people are doing. So one, it was just expanding my appreciation for all the folks that are so good-hearted out there doing some really good work. I'll say more about that later. And then being able to, get to know them in the preparation, but just how fun the interactions were.
Yes.
And how engaging I found them to be, how much fun we had. When I first took on the show, I talked to a couple of people and they said, you want to make the show yours. I thought, mine? What would that mean if I did? Every show, I found myself being able to create an environment that would be welcoming to our guests, to allow them to feel comfortable. You and I would always use with our guests kind of a little bit of a pat phrase. Hey, we're going to sit down, kind of have a fireside chat together over a cup of coffee, talk some story, kind of nerding out at times, in certain topics, and really enjoying the talk together around the areas that they are most interested in, really good at, I have some interest in. And hopefully in that process, in that exchange, our listeners would, one, really have a great time listening in. Two, really learn some things in a really unique way in that kind of exchange, and have a takeaway of an experience that was unique to what we could do in the podcast together. So that was my hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, having listened in to 300 plus episodes together, really getting to some of those deeper conversations was so incredibly special. And even just, we talk about there's a lot of work that goes into this, but there are moments of doing this show where we get to play, and it felt like we were having fun. So I think it really did come out into the podcast, and I do think that those are the real special moments.
I think one of the things that, I think you're right. I think you're exactly right on that. We got to play, but in that play too, there was some really great things. I mean, we laughed and we cried at times, and we had some really good interactions. What I really appreciate about our guests, and I'm kind of this way anyway, maybe it's part of my work, but it's also my interest in people. I would oftentimes poke at folks, and gently, but poke with curiosity and interest, and to watch their vulnerability. We even had a guy in our most recent podcast say, I've never said this on a podcast before. And he come in and say something. Or I remember a couple of people that I shared some things with, and they paused and they were willing to kind of go down to some levels within themselves to share some things that were really, I think, really vulnerable. But when they did, it accentuated, I believe, the dimensionality of our work that allowed it to be enriched by their willingness to be both transparent and vulnerable with us. So I think that was part of the play as well, being able to do that.
Yeah, and I think we'll cover this later in the podcast, but it really does highlight your ability to really connect with these people, as well as, you did a really good job of phrasing, because I know you were approaching something that might have a little bit more conflict, but you were really good about setting it up. There was a lot of intention to the questions.
That's very kind. Thank you.
So I want to change topics a little bit.
Let's do it.
And I know we've explored a lot of topics. I'll name a couple: clinical work, children's mental health, the role of family, our divided nation, authenticity, relationships, primary prevention. So sort of reflecting on the vast amount of episodes and some of the conversations that they had, was there a particular theme that resonated with you the most, that felt particularly meaningful or impactful?
Yeah, I think there are some. I really like men's health. I like innovation. Not to get away from the interpersonal piece of mental health. I don't think, I'll talk a bit more later on where I see things going, technology-wise and those types of things. But I think really what stood out to me was the hearts of the people that I heard in each area of their work. So I really enjoyed, the men's health. I enjoyed those shows where I saw people really dealing with the vulnerability around other people's lives. Some people are really struggling. Some people don't know how bad they're struggling and how hard things really are. But to watch these folks come into these people's lives in such a tender, compassionate, structured, supportive way really stood out to me. I think if we're to look at, maybe some shows that stand out, I'd probably reflect on Kevin Hines. Kevin Hines was the one that
Yes.
survived suicide,
Yes.
jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he was a phenomenal guest. This is a guy, this is a guy who, right before he jumped, just hoped that someone would say, "Are you okay?" And he had multiple opportunities before he jumped off that bridge. He was on the bus going to the bridge. He was just about to jump, and someone said, "Excuse me, sir." And he thought, "Oh, maybe this is it," because he didn't want to jump. But he was so desperate and so hurting. And he was so hopeful someone would just say, "Hey." And so when someone said, "Excuse me, sir," he thought, "Oh, this is it. I don't have to jump." And then they said, "Would you mind taking our picture?" So despairing, so hopeless, he jumped. And fortunately, although he shattered, the tremendous amount of bones in his body,
Right.
and he couldn't make it to the top, here comes this seal to bring him to the top of the water and save his life. What a phenomenal story. And then he takes the
Yes.
story and he goes all over to help people now deal with the despair and hopelessness that he was going through. He has a wonderful story. So I so loved being with him. Owen Marcus and, Lucas Crump, as we talked about, every man.
Yes.
And men out there are hurting. Men are good guys trying to do right things, but confused, and led astray with a number of things. So being able to watch what these guys are doing, we just had a show recently with them, and it was a phenomenal way to catch up and see what they're doing now. I enjoyed Neha Sangwan. She talked about burnout. We still have a relationship and talk and partner on some things. And so it's these topics, but I think it's just really the people that I saw behind the topics, their heart that I saw behind the topics, and to listen why they got into these fields and what they've done with it. A lot of people, as you mentioned, they got into this field because of their own adversity. I oftentimes told a joke during the podcast where people say, "Well, Graham, you just went into psychology, to figure yourself out." And I said, absolutely, that's why I went into psychology, to figure myself out. I wanted to know kind of what was going on, how things work, and what I can bring into the field, or bring into my life first, and then into the field second. And I saw time after time people doing the same thing, where they would go through adversity and then recognize that, well, wait a minute, what if I were to be able to turn this around in the spirit of resilience and in the spirit of my own growth, but then also find a way to help others who are struggling with something similar? Because there are some things where it takes one to know one. And when someone who's been through something is talking about some things and they say, "Hey, somehow, although my story is unique to yours, you have an understanding of me that is really helping me kind of work through something that I never thought I could work through." So I guess those are some things that come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, again, parking on sort of that idea of getting into mental health because of the work you wanted to do yourself. When
Yeah.
we've had those conversations, what really strikes out to me, especially when you label those guests, is that everyone's on a different journey. But
Yes.
those that you're highlighting are on that real moment of transcendence
That's right.
where they really have taken this terrible moments in their lives and really
That's right.
transcended it into giving back to somebody else that, they know this experience and they're
Yeah.
helping other people to sort of guide through it. We talked about, recovery programs and people sort of using that peer specialist. This is that, but in a very
Yes.
dialogue form.
When you put it like that, you're highlighting something, Peter, that's really noteworthy. Kubler-Ross's stages of death and dying, surprise and anger and bargaining and depression and anger and acceptance. We used to think we could just get to acceptance and, well, that would be good. Accept something and work through it and deal with it, weave it into your life. But what you're saying right now is there's the opportunity to transcend that trauma, that difficulty in your life, and make some meaning out of it. And that meaning that gets to be made out of it, Man's Search for Meaning, is really a wonderful book that I've just been rereading. And the idea that we get to make meaning out of our lives, out of our suffering. And if we don't, we miss an opportunity to transcend something and have a higher level experience that is really available to us. I think that's a really great thing to highlight.
Yeah. As we sort of talk about these conversations, were there any of those that really sort of changed your perspective of mental health? Maybe an area of mental health or a field?
I don't know if it changed it so much as I think maybe helped me develop a deeper appreciation. I do a lot of prep work for those still going through their licensing exams in mental health, and I almost always preface my talk with them about appreciating this field, how many areas we get taught to address and how much we can bring to people's lives to benefit them. So I think the thing that, and I love your question, is kind of a re-experiencing of, a reappreciation for this field that touches every single area of our life. And in our lives, our mental health drives everything. And we got to go, like you said earlier, we got to go into personal tragedy. We got to go into the streets and see what people are doing in their work, Pathways Home and the Elhorn's program where he's basically a hospital without walls. Yeah, absolutely. Going to people's homes. We were in classrooms together, you and me. We were in people's businesses. We were talked about multiculturalism and what people brought in. We went into people's technology realms. We went into doctors' offices, you and me, listening to people, what they're doing there.
Yes.
We got to talk to, about, racism and sex trafficking, sports psychology, with Indiana Colts and Bill Parham, with, the NBA's Players Association, mental health, violent crime. Yes. So we touched so many things. And I think when I say all those, and there's many, many more, is just the reach that mental health has, and just a reappreciation for all the people that are out there doing some really intentionally good work.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so many names you just named. I remember when we did the work with Bill Parham, how exciting it was to meet the NBA players.
Yeah,
I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, he was just the coolest guy. He's just a smooth guy to begin with, but just a chill guy. And then he had a couple of guys came on the show with us, and they were so gracious to give us of their time and to be as transparent as they were. I mean, these are big, hulking, successful guys talking about, I had some really significant mental health issues, and I want people to know, and I want to talk about it. I want to bust the myth. And that was really wonderful.
It was. And again, it's a total shift of how you see these players.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's talk about the guests. Do you have a favorite guest or an episode that comes to mind? I know you named a whole bunch of them, but let's talk about maybe some of your favorites.
Well, I think I mentioned just a couple right there. I think Kevin Hines was a really great guest. I think what stands out for me as a guest, I really worked each show as best I could to see just how, I don't know what the right word is, maybe close each guest would allow me to get to them, in terms of getting to know them and maybe mining down into some areas. And everybody has a different, tolerance of that. And I like to think it was comfortable in me doing so, but I think some people had a different level of openness that really moved me. I think Kevin Hines was one. I really enjoyed our time with Bill Parham. He's just I'm an athlete as well, and so be able to talk what he was talking and meet some of the things that they're doing, it was really kind of resonated easy with me. I was really moved by Russ Elhorn in our show. I became emotional in the show, actually. It was just and what touched me about him was not so much what he was doing or how he was doing it, but it was his spirit. It was his heart. We had another woman on that talked about grief, and I became emotional in that show. And I think the things that stood out to me was the level of resonance at times the guest and I were able to share. And that to me was really moving. That kept me just so interested in this podcast, finding out how could we connect in such a way where there was a resonance. And my hope was, and not that this was the intention, but the hope as a takeaway was that maybe the guests got a sense of that too. And that they maybe had something resonate in them that they hadn't expected to have, resonate in a meaningful way. So I think I enjoyed Lloyd Setter. He was a psychiatrist out of New York, and just about,
you guys really connected.
Ink Stained Life, and he talked about his upbringing. We went from his upbringing to the TV show Reacher.
Right.
And every time we talked, man, it was just, for me, those kinds of conversations are really fun because that's old school psychology in my books.
Sure.
Where you just sit down, you're talking life, you're talking at depth, and you're talking about these things that stand out and where they touch you. And so I really enjoyed some of those guys and gals.
Yeah. And I know, working behind the scenes, some of the words that got exchanged after the episode were some of the most special moments. Really, you could tell that, there's been folks that have been doing the podcast scene for a minute, but really having a chance to interact with us for an hour was meaningful and impactful in their lives.
Yeah, I think I hope that would be the case. And I think you got people so prepped, and you're right after the fact of, after each show, we had a chance to kind of debrief with the guests themselves, and then you and I afterwards. But those are some really unstructured conversations, weren't they? That were really enjoyable. Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. I want to ask, were there any misconnections that we had? Maybe a guest that came onto the show we'd love to have back that maybe we didn't get a chance to go deep enough. Is there any kind that come to mind?
Yeah. No one comes to mind in terms of a missed, kind of connection in terms of depth. What I really feel can be helpful is when we get, some folks that might have kind of a status. I know we had talked about it. It's very difficult to do, to get maybe some, famous people, if you will, on the show, Selena Gomez and some other people that have been so open about their mental health issues that I think they've got a platform that can be helpful. But in terms of the people that we had, and what I really loved is that there were times in the show where you and I kind of almost looked at each other, and I knew what you were thinking. You were thinking probably, we need to have this person back to do another show, to go a little bit deeper. And what we created together was this idea of our clinician series, where we got to say, hey, you know what? We've got a great general understanding of what you do, what it looks like, and what people experience. Now we want to take our listeners into, if they were to be experiencing this with you, taking them behind the proverbial, therapy door, like we would phrase it, and to go down into a level that talked about, the ideas. What's the therapist thinking? What's the patient experiencing? The constructs, the ideas behind it, what they come out with. I really enjoyed those shows because I really want folks. Well, little sidebar. I don't think mental health always does a great job of telling us what happens behind that therapy door. And sometimes I think people get a little, concerned, a little wary of, what happens behind that. Is it safe? And, you got to be crazy no, you don't have to be crazy to go to therapy. You don't have to be crazy to grow, really. And so I think we got a chance to humanize and normalize that. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Of course I can see that resonate for me. And there's a way through this, but I don't know the way through it. I'm kind of stuck, but I can see maybe where I could grow in a very interested way. So those were some fun shows where we got to go a little deeper together in the clinician series that we came up with. And I think, I hope folks really got a good sense of what can happen and what they could see maybe playing out in their lives.
Yeah. And I thought one of the nicest things about that series is that we tried to make a gentle introduction to what it is. It's not like you immediately dive deep into some traumatic event. In fact, some techniques that we've learned about, are very aware of that and try to address the trauma on a different level to where you're not re-traumatizing. But I thought one of the nicest things, again, being the producer of the show and not necessarily having a degree or a background in psychology, it was just so eye-opening to the process of therapy. And it made it so gentle to where I'm hoping that folks who might be on a layman's terms are listening into that and getting a better appreciation for what goes into it.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying it that way, because I think it's welcoming people in to look at some very challenging or difficult areas of their life that they know something is there, but they may not be able to put their finger on. And there's a really loving, gentle, and inviting way to bring people into that, to get curious, to recognize why things happen the way they do. What's the origin of these things? Not to go back and blame and point fingers and villainize people in the past, but to really work through some things and to grow some areas that, they have the potential to grow, that maybe has been hindered or tamped down by some of their pain or hurt. So yeah, I would agree with you. Did you have a favorite guest as you think back that we got to do together?
Man, I've really enjoyed working with John Steele. He's come on to our podcast a few times, but he has just been so fun to work with. He's got such a great attitude. I know he actually was introduced back like when Aaron was doing the show.
Okay.
And, and I want to also say, like, the relationship that we crafted with Erin, because she started off as just a guest.
Yeah.
And she actually inspired a lot of creativity to the podcast. In fact, like, we created the Early Career Professional series from her. Now, that was one that I wish that we could have gone deeper into, because I think that that's like a whole area where folks could really learn in some of the areas of mental health. But yeah, I would say John Steele, Aaron. I mean, I was blown away by some of the celebrity guests that we had.
Yeah.
We did the show with Bill Parham and the basketball players.
Yes.
Names are slipping me now, but
Indiana Colts.
Right. And like even just some of the guests, I'll queue up some that we've done with Charlie, but Christina Rasmussen has been an incredible guest, and she's been on our show, and she was coming and talking about the grief. So yeah, there have been some really awesome guests. Amy Pickett Williams, like
Yes.
in talking about grief and from a somatic side.
Yes.
Christina Miles and talking about the skill of listening. I thought I was like, wow, this is really fascinating. This is a skill I can improve upon.
We all can. That's right. We all can. Yeah.
So there's a lot.
It's great to kind of go down memory lane with our guests. And what I really enjoyed too, and I think it shows that they maybe experienced what we were hoping they would experience. They very readily were open to coming back and doing another show with us and doing shows over the years with us. In a nice relational way that I think was really a nice testament to what we were looking to create with them and an experience we were hoping for them to have. We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Most of us spend more time at work than anywhere else doing anything else. So why not spend that time in a job you love? Introducing Triad's Jobs Marketplace, the only job site dedicated specifically to behavioral and mental health professionals. Featuring more than 1,000 open jobs from dozens of behavioral and mental health employers, and searchable by location, professional field, employment type, specialization, and more. Jobs Marketplace helps you find your next career opportunity. Full-time, part-time, or gig time, make the most of your time. To access Jobs Marketplace, register for your free professional account at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT, and then click to Jobs Marketplace. If you're already a member of the Triad community, visit app.hellotriad.com/jobs. That's app.hellotriad.com/jobs. Visit us today and take your next career step tomorrow.
Yeah. So I know we've had like the privilege of hosting guests, and they've introduced some really groundbreaking innovations in the behavioral health field, whether it's advancements in the medical offices or expanded access to mental health services, pioneering research that shaped new therapeutic techniques and interventions. Has there been any innovation or approach that we've discussed that really you feel is shaping the future of therapy? What stood out to you?
Yeah, I really, I think that's a great question. I think a couple stand out to me. One was I really appreciated was with Saj Razvi, who is involved with the psychedelic psychotherapy. And what I love about that is that it really stimulated me to think about a new approach that a colleague and I have developed that does something very similar, but without the need for the psychedelic component of it, medication for it. But his show was, to me, we had him on a couple of times, was so fascinating. And the research I did around that was just fascinated me in what they're doing. And his approach and his clinician-assisted psychedelic, treatment was phenomenal. And helping people heal at a whole nother level was really exciting to hear about. And I was just so impressed with his research, what they're doing, and to see that now being a national conversation more and more. And it should take place. It is a very controlled, very beneficial therapy that he began to kind of demystify from all the things that happened in the 60s and 70s, if you will.
Sure.
So I really enjoyed that show. I really enjoyed the show with Rima Olsen and Prentice Tom when they talked about kintsugi. And, the idea that depression, being one of our biggest mental health challenges, it's not oftentimes easy to diagnose and challenge in terms of its diagnosis and to really see. But here's this company coming up with a phenomenal ability to tell if someone is depressed by listening to their voice.
By their
phenomenal.
language.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what they say and the words that are typically used. And to be able to weave this into some arenas like one's, doctor's office. They can do this, and then the doctor has a whole nother level dimension. We know about roughly 68% of presenting problems in a physician's office have a mental health component to it. But the docs in their training, understandably, focus on more the physical medical side, not the mental health piece. They can really be accentuating the medical side of someone's presentation. So to be able to have this tool, I thought was just amazing. So some things like that I thought were great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and to park a little bit more on Saj Rosvi,
Yes.
one of the things that really was enlightening, I know you and I have also been a part of the Triad Summits, and we had
Yes.
Saj speak at one of our summits.
Yeah.
But in his presentation, he actually showed a session of what it was like to go through it. And I thought that that was so illuminating to the process because you can see how gentle he is in the process and really how the medicine that they're using created a sense of vulnerability for folks to really dive deep into it.
Yes. Yeah. He's got a great website, Psychedelic Somatic Institute.org. And on the site,
PSI.
He has, PSI. And on the site, he has multiple videos, a phenomenal white paper, and a number, of pages with some good content on it. And these videos, like you're just saying right there, Peter, demonstrate the safety of this approach, demonstrate the transformative nature of this approach. And I believe his most recent webpage has, or updated webpage, has his own experience with psychedelic treatment on it. So I admired his transparency in talking about this as well. But yeah, it's a wonderful approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And to even park on this, if folks want to go back, and I'll encourage the listeners, go back and listen to our episode with Natalie Lieberman, because she talks about her own psychedelic experience and going through that and how transformative it was for her. I think some of the things that she came away with was really enlightening.
Agreed. That those types of things you're describing right there, we kind of have some sense that they're there. We might even begin to name kind of a rough sense of what they are, but we can access those things safely and we can work through those things safely. So those things no longer influence, control, impact, hijack our lives. And we can experience relief from those things in really hopeful ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, to her experience allowed her to feel feelings in her body that she was resistant to. And I thought that that was very interesting.
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah. Well, again, I want to go back to, I sort of cued this at the beginning of our show, the art of therapy. And I know you have a really great way to engage with new guests and are really allowed to connect with them.
Nice. Thank you.
You've used the word art of therapy, and you're talking about really this ability to come into relationship with another. Do you have any advice for aspiring mental health professionals about building that particular skill?
I think that is the art of therapy. I think, when we look at that in our own personal development, we come into the world and our developmental tasks, kind of a rough review of Erickson's developmental theories, basically says it's about trust versus mistrust. That's our very first developmental milestone. And that experience is not just in our birth, but it's every time we meet somebody, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's, in a therapy session, whether it's a neighbor. It's about trust versus mistrust, period. Is this going to be a safe relationship that I can anticipate good things happening in the exchange with this person? And then kind of the second way that I kind of see is that we kind of build an identity from there. Who are we and what are we doing? After we do those two things, it's safe and it's trusting and we recognize who and what we are. Then we get to go get busy, in life, healing sometimes, growing in other times, discovering things, working in a partnership. So for those that are coming up in the ranks, I'm really happy you're in the field. Congratulations for finding an extremely rewarding field. I spoke with a colleague the other day, somebody who has, played every role for me in life, from my director of training to a professor to everything, every role. And I just so love this guy. And we were talking about an awards ceremony I remember him being a part of, and he got up to the lectern to say thank you. And he said, I can't believe they pay me for this. All that to say, he so loved what he does, as do I, that it's an extremely rewarding career. And you can go through your schooling, you can go through your testing, you can pass exams, you can get certified, licensed, all those things. But I think it's the heart that you're going to bring to the relationships that's sitting on your couch, that's in front of you on a podcast, I hope, the self that you bring into that. And ideally, you're squared away as a person, you're aligned with your true design. and you're coming from a place of being egoless, without ego, where you're coming from a place of curiosity and interest in the other person, where you're showing a real concern for who they are and helping them kind of curate a very similar curiosity about themselves. And so I think the art of therapy is about really being human. I think that's what touched me most about Elhorn's presentation, is that his humanness. That's kind of where I started off in the field. I started off with family therapy, some of the humanist existential guys and women. These are the most human people. And in that show, I became emotional because I got reminded of the heart that can be there, that is just so inviting, just to be who you are without any judgment, without any, you don't have to be any way for approval or acceptance. You get to be just you. And I think that's part of the art of therapy as well, letting someone appreciate that you're with them just for who they are. And your interest is just in them being a fellow human being. So for my, my colleagues coming up behind me, congratulations for being in a wonderful field. And you're going to have all kinds of techniques and strategies and science-based approaches, which are necessary and important. But it's that relationship piece that's going to be most healing. And that's what the research shows over and over and over again. And not everybody can create a artful, therapeutic relationship like that. So work at that.
Yeah. I mean, the relationship you're describing, and we've had other conversations around it, but someone that came to mind when you're describing this was Guy McPherson.
Oh, absolutely.
He was talking about her conversations around authenticity.
Right.
And I thought that was so beautiful. So I appreciate you taking some time. And I'll poke on this a little bit longer. Are there any advice that you would have for other aspiring mental health professionals based on what we've learned on the show?
Yes, I think it's a good question too. One is to really work at being a good clinician. One, do your own work. Be on the other side of the couch, or be on the couch, and then other role or other position in the room. Really do your own work. Understand yourself. Don't do your work through the people you see. Also, too, recognize where you feel yourself being called. Like you said earlier, we were in every realm of psychology, from the classroom to the business, IO and industrial organizational, to being on the streets, to being in the therapy office. We talked with a guy most recently, who's in the gym, working with autistic young men and women. Listen to your own calling on the inside. Find out what you love doing, and then find a way to extend that into your profession. Because if there's a need out there, you can find a way to meet it. My daughter was a professional athlete for a number of years, and she went back and just got her MFT. And so now she's in the mental health realm doing wonderful work, but she also coaches teams still. So now she gets to talk about, helping athletes in a mental health approach to deal with adversity. One of the gals she's working with, tore her ACL for the second time. This is a teenager, phenomenal athlete. But she gets to come alongside her now in a mental health realm, but also as an athlete, to talk about, hey, how are we going to get through this? And how do you keep your head up? How do we set goals? Or to talk with parents about how to best not coach your child as your child is playing. How to encourage your child on a day-to-day basis over the years as they develop as an athlete. Or to talk to coaches and the right ways to approach. So you find one area and you find a number of tentacles that can go out, areas where you can really touch people's lives in a variety of ways that you can have personal interest in, and use your professional, talents and skills and abilities to really make an impact. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that is really exciting. And I love to hear this story, because I remember your daughter coming on our podcast.
That's right.
And talking really about the psychology of sports. It's wonderful that she's really kind of taking that next level into MFT.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
me too.
Yeah, that's lovely. I want to reflect a little about the podcast. We've worked together for 5 years, and we really had a really nice synergy together.
I agree.
Yeah, I know for our listeners, the process of the show really will include me meeting with the guests and putting together the outline. And then you'll really put your own imprint on it, Graham. And, I've said it before, one of the best qualities I've seen is really how personal you've made the interviews. You have a really keen ability to take some of my ideas and really some of your own and create a direction that really felt meaningful and personal.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to miss watching how organically some of those conversations unfolded into really human moments on the show. But I want to ask you, what will you miss most about doing the podcast?
I think, it was a really nice way for me to kind of round out my professional life and parts of my week where I'd be doing therapy or trainings or consultations. And then I got to come in on Thursdays and Fridays, prepped for with a good doc, but I got to sit down with people that were really of interest to me, that were willing to come on and let us know what they were doing. So it was a nice break in my week to sit down as a professional, but also as a curious other. I would literally, Peter, I would walk away from each podcast. I cannot remember one podcast I had where I didn't walk away either inspired and or kind of somehow rejuvenated in some ways. I'd be smiling. The rest of my day would feel light because I got to sit and talk and share and learn. Sometimes, kind of mind down a little bit into things that were just really, I think, wonderful. Got to teach some things, I think, along the way is my hope.
Yeah.
And I was just so inspired after each one and so impressed with the guests and what they're doing in their lives. And these are my colleagues that are out there in some dimension of the realm of the field, doing right things, doing good things, and leaving some great impressions, and ideally changing people's lives through the relationship that they're forming and the skills and abilities and that they're bringing to their lives. So I think I'll miss that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can tell some of those episodes that we've done, how impactful some of them have, because I know we'll reference that in
Yes,
other
that's right.
shows.
That's
They'll be
right.
like, oh, we've met with such and such like a
Right.
week back. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a really good conversation. I remember that one.
I think I'll also miss our times too. You and I would have
Yeah.
some really some fun leading into the show. We usually get on the show, 15 minutes or so earlier before it started, and we do the intro and outro. But then we just kind of talk and chat and kind of just become, I think, greater friends, which has been really nice. And
Yes.
I really enjoyed the friendship. And then after the show, we would just debrief, and you and I would go down. Those would have been fun ones to capture, just outtakes in some ways, and
Right.
that were just fun to, in the debriefing process, just free associate, talk, what stood out to you, and just kind of share in that piece. So I really enjoyed those times as well with you. Those were really a fun way to capstone what we just spent the prior hour doing together. So that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And really those were moments for us to kind of connect.
Yeah.
I've also really enjoyed the moments of us sort of building the podcast into, what we have now, where we've expanded onto social media. We're now into YouTube. We've now worked together on some of our online conferences. So it has been an incredible experience to really collaborate in that way, where we've started with just conversations and we've started to elevate it into, a bigger platform to where we're having an opportunity to invite these guests back to teach other folks, hundreds of online folks coming together for those conferences.
I think that in large part, Peter, has been, you as the executive director being so creative in your thinking, making one, those that are listening, Peter makes this so seamless to come into, both for me technologically, for our guests, in terms of a focus. He's so well prepared. I know you had to be rolling your eyes at me sometimes when I'd be like, where do I plug this in, or which button do I hit over here? But you were always patient.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
Never rattled. Always inviting. Did you restart your computer, Graham? To just a variety of things, to the creativity with the YouTube, with the videoing of this, to make it really accessible to people in a multidimensional way. And then, your work with our summits. And I hope people attend those. Those are phenomenal people coming in to do some teachings that are for free and exposure to things. We got some really great summit guests, and you make that process really smooth. So, in large part, our growth and some of the visions, that we've been able to achieve and reach are what you bring to this. And that's been really noteworthy and really a fun thing to be a part of and share with you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a fun process.
Yes,
it's been a fun
has.
process. There are parts of this where it has pushed me into new areas I never thought I would go into. and I've learned a heck of a lot during the process.
Yeah, man. I agree. I agree.
You know what? You used the word teaching, and I want to park on that, And I know you've left us with a lot of wisdom in each episode.
That's kind. Thank you.
Has there been a big takeaway or one of your biggest takeaways from hosting the show?
Well, it's interesting because when, one friend in particular, when I was first starting out, he said, make the show yours. And, I thought about, well, what would that even mean for me to do that? And while I wanted to highlight what the guests were doing without in any way, seeming pretentious, I also know that I wanted to try and bring some things that maybe, in my 30 years might be able to take what the guest is saying and kind of highlight it, accentuate it, and maybe even encourage the guest to go a little bit deeper as I share some of my insights or awarenesses or things that I know in that area. Yeah. And I also, wanted to try and, I guess, educate, teach in some ways that I just love to do. I'd like people to recognize, what is out there, what can be done. And so I hope that, some of the things that I was able to bring to accentuate what our guests were saying, maybe add some new things along the way, were helpful and were received in a beneficial way, helpful way.
Yeah. Again, just being the conscientious listener, there has been so much that you've shared that I will carry for the rest of my life, truly. And
that's very kind.
And just listening in, the expansion of some of the concepts have been so good. I mean, to the point to where 300 episodes I can talk with some experience to some of these themes.
Yeah, you
so
can.
I think
I'm going to give you an honorary degree, man.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, what I like too is that we all grow in a process, and ideally we take that growth and we bring it back into the things that we're involved with. And I think I've watched you, in our preparation of our guests and our welcoming of our guests and getting them ready, and you've really kind of nudged them to go deeper and deeper themselves as you put those docs together for them to review. So you've done some of the things that I do in the podcast, but you've done that in a preparatory way that they come in kind of all massaged up, ready to go, and kind of loose for me, which was really a wonderful experience. So you on the front end really made an impact on them coming in, just relax, just chill with their cup of coffee, and off we went.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And part of that, the same amount of skills that you sort of go through in the process of the interview are some of the things that I have learned to do myself in some of those introductions. So nice. That real nice synergy between us. I really felt it.
I'm happy about that. That's good, man.
Well, again, it's hard to put into words the immense impact you've had on the podcast, as well as the other parts of Triad, And I also want to voice to everyone, that we've worked with, how sad we are to see you sort of leave the podcast.
Well,
and even though that window isn't completely closed, I do want to give you an opportunity to sort of address the listeners on if you want to leave them with a farewell message here.
Yeah, I would. I just so appreciate, there are hundreds and there are thousands of podcasts out there, and to take your time to spend with us really means something to me. And I know, Peter, you as well, to take the time to listen in and I think when, one of our main commodities is what? It's our time. And so you're giving us some of your life, some of your time. That's pretty precious. And I hope you feel like we stewarded the time that you gave us well, by expanding some understanding of things through helping you maybe grow in an area, whether you're a professional or just in your personal life. And so I want to thank the listeners very much for entrusting us with their time. And I hope that we left you maybe changed, or maybe understanding some things, curious, maybe even coming into the field, or maybe growing in the field that you're already in ways that maybe you hadn't thought you could do before. But just thanking them for their willingness to join us. That means a lot, and to entrust us again with their time and with just their heart. So that's been very, very meaningful to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I appreciate that. And I know we're coming to a close today, but before I do, I'd like to ask if you'd like to leave our listeners with one piece of hope or encouragement, what would that be?
Keep listening to the show. It's a wonderful show, and tell your friends. This is a wonderful podcast with great topics, great people, executive producing it, hosting it, wonderful guests coming in, cutting edge people coming in, really some great talent. And the hope is that you can grow by exposing yourself to a side of our lives, the mental health side, that we can see that accentuates everything in our lives. When we find out what people are doing, you might even be inspired to come into the field. Or what you might even find yourself in the field that you're in, or the area of specialty you're in. You might even find yourself expanding it into another part of mental health. It's a playground out there for mental health. It's a candy store in some ways. There's so many things that you can do. So many things, from the courts to, health and everything in between. So listen in, continue listening, tell your friends, bring them on over, grab a cup of coffee with them and participate. And if you're a professional, listening in, and you've got something you want to share, give Peter a call. He'll set you up and he'll bring you in and you can contribute to our listenership. But the hope is, I think the show is going to continue to just blossom with continued great guests and wonderful hosts hosting it.
It was really, really well said. Thank you, Graham.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks. Well, my friend, there is no denying that there will be a Graham-sized void that will be felt. But for today, I want to express my deep appreciation, not only for this conversation, but for this incredible journey of 300 plus episodes that you've shared. Your leadership, expertise, and genuine spirit shaped the heart of this podcast. And I know I'm not alone in feeling grateful for everything that you've poured into it. I, again, have learned so much from you, and I'm going to carry that with the rest of my life. Really grateful for the time that we shared together.
I'm equally as grateful, and that's been my honor, truly, to be the host, the way that I've been allowed to be, and just so enjoyed being, and I've really enjoyed our friendship, and it's been my honor. So thank you for what you've brought, allowing us to create together and to let people benefit from. So it's been my true pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to experience it.
Yeah, thanks for your time today, Graham.
So great to be with you, Peter. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to also thank our listeners for tuning into today's episode. I'd like to take this opportunity to announce that you'll be hearing more from me as a new voice for our show to complement Charlie as our other host. And we'll also be adding additional voices from the Triad family. As we've built this show, we've strived to a format that includes multiple voices and perspectives. So if there's an opportunity to match a new guest with new voices for Triad, I believe that we can cultivate more diversity of discussions for our listeners. The resources for all of our episodes can be found on our website at triadhq.com/BHT. Leave us a review on your favorite podcatcher, and you can watch our episodes on our YouTube channel at Behavioral Health Today. You can also find us on our socials on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and more, all of those at Behavioral Health Today. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again on Behavioral Health Today. We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.